Welcome to everybody to the session on transforming the politics of high-speed rail. And this is the next to the last session here. Appreciate those of you who are political aficionados to stay and have this discussion. My name is Bob Creamer. I'm a consultant to the campaign or the coalition or the association, whichever entity is appropriate. I'm a political consultant. I've been doing this for about 5 decades and working with Congress. And what I thought we'd do is start off. I just want to quickly start off with a couple of quick notes in the PowerPoint here. On Congress. I mean, how do we broaden and intensify support for high-speed rail in Congress? It's kind of a major topic we want to think about here. There are various hurdles. We're making progress, but we got to make more progress. So I thought I'd just start real quick with a quick summary of after 5 decades of working on issue campaigns, my summary of the major general self-interest of members of Congress. Number one, there we go. Number one, the desire to get reelected. This, of course, varies depending upon the context of the congressman or congressperson. My wife is a member of Congress, Jan Schakowsky, for those of you who don't know, and her district is one that's a pretty Democratic district, and she's a Democrat, and so primaries would be her major concern if there's a concern. The same is not true for a lot of members. Sometimes it's general elections. Sometimes it's no election because they're so well ensconced. The need to raise campaign funds, an ancillary, consequence of the need to get reelected. There's the desire to position himself or herself to a higher office, like run for president or something else where your constituents are not just your constituents in your district. There's the desire to stand up for strongly held beliefs and convictions. Something that it predominates in Congress more than a lot of people believe. A lot of people would want to, no kidding around, stand up for their beliefs or on both sides of the aisle. There's the desire to please legislative peers and move up the leadership ladder. Ask McCarthy if that's not an incentive for your behavior. There's the need to deliver benefits to the district. There are party considerations quite apart from your individual party consideration, your own individual considerations that may come to bear. There's the desire to please major secondary players upon whom you depend, the mayor, to whoever else helps you get in office. There's the desire to please friends with which you have a personal relationship or political, ethnic, personal, or business relationship, because friends are hard to get. And members of Congress are particularly sensitive to wanting them. There's the desire not to alienate people who work for your campaign re-election or are part of your political movement. If you're a progressive, you don't want to be labeled as something else. There's the desire to be part of the mainstream. People, after all, are pack animals. Bandwagon really matters. Once we start showing everybody's on the right side of something, lots of people will come. One of the reasons why having members of Congress come here and talk to you is good for not just us, but for their belief in what we're doing. They talk themselves into a belief that this is an extremely important question. The desire to get a job with a special interest after they leave their service, more predominant than we would like, but definitely there. Desire to avoid diverting time and energy to deal with persistent set of constituents. Even if it's a small set of constituents, if they're causing you trouble, members of Congress would like to make them go away. There's the need to be liked by constituents and colleagues and friends and lobbyists. Politicians are particularly, and they like to be liked a lot, and they fear anger. There are jurisdictional questions. My committee, I want to make sure my committee has jurisdiction or whatever. And there's one overriding point of all of this. In messaging to legislators of any sort, the message directed to the target decision makers need to address whichever of these self-interests predominate for the particular legislator or group of legislators. And that may mean that the communication in question may have nothing to do directly with the content of the issue. That is to say, it ain't just the merits of high-speed rail that's the subject. It may be whether it's politically high ground. It may be whether or not a bunch of your friends are asking you. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why people might back us that have nothing to do with the merits or the content of the issue. All right, so all of that said, let's turn to some questions about how we build more support on high-speed rail. why don't we start with you, Mike? One of the problems with high-speed rail is that a lot of people perceive it as an elite coasty thing, you know? Something that's not gonna benefit folks in the heartland.
Okay,
How do you think, you're from West Virginia, how do you deal with that?
yes, and West Virginia is a very rural state. Our largest city has 49,000 people roughly in it. After you get to either 13 or 15, all those communities are less than 10,000 people. So many of the legislators in West Virginia would think, what do we need high-speed rail? Why should I put my constituents' tax dollars into something they will never need? And I would go and I would talk to them. Basically, investing in high-speed rail could be tantamount to investing in their community. West Virginia, small, rural, but it is known as a housing haven. It is the best cost of living in the country. You know what you could do if you would put 1 or 2 industries in West Virginia with a lot of housing, a low cost of living? You're going to invite people to come to West Virginia. Hey, there's good jobs here in West Virginia, and I can buy an affordable house. That is going to prop up that whole community, and it gets everybody's going to like that politician. That politician's going to get reelected. Everything you covered is going to be on that plate for whoever makes that decision once high-speed rail is up and running.
So part of the supply chain went to West Virginia, suddenly you got a lot more support in communities that may or may not be directly involved in the high speed itself. What about, I mean, aren't there parts of West Virginia you could commute to Washington for a job easily if you just had a high-speed rail line?
Indeed, and right now it's just select parts of West Virginia, Martinsburg, somewhere that's near a MARC station that they can get, or somewhere, really that's the only place if MARC connects you up in the Panhandle. With high-speed rail, you could be a little further out, getting those acreage. If you want acreage, go a little further out, we'll catch the train and ride a little bit. Plus, that train is going to be incredible. It's going to reduce the transit time incredibly. Yeah.
Massive amounts. Dean, what is, you're part of a union that's has lots of people who are not in the rail business. How do we get people in the labor movement who are not directly related to high-speed rail to support high-speed rail, and as a consequence to communicate to their legislators that this is a really good thing?
Well, I'd be honest with you, the high-speed rail will bring some members into our union, but we're affiliated with the Service Employees International Union.
Are we good?
Why don't you turn that off?
Thank you.
There you go. Go ahead, bud.
So we're affiliated with
It's on.
the Service International Union with over 2 million members. We'll pick up some members at these high-speed lines throughout the country, no doubt about it. But it's nothing compared to what the other unions and industries are going to enjoy. So history has shown when you build it, they build around it. So if they build a station, let's say any part of the country, like they did in Florida, they built a station in Miami. They're starting to build buildings around it. I believe it's like a $3 billion investment around that station. Now they build a station here in Washington, D.C. What they're going to do is you're going to see office buildings built, green new ones. You're going to see low-income housing. You're going to see high-income housing. You're going to see hospitals, schools, doctors' offices. And most important is the small business you're going to see. You're going to see small businesses popping up. You're going to see a tailor, a dry cleaner, a pizzeria. That is the backbone of this country. And they're going to build that, and it will be done probably with union labor, contractors who are going to build those stations and build the buildings around it. And then I'm not even talking about who's going to build the lines. So the truth is, rail labor is going to get a very, very, very minute piece in this. The rest of labor is going to enjoy a huge benefit in this.
All right.
I answered your question.
You did. And making that case to the rest of the labor movement, great thing, because the labor movement, a lot of politicians pay a lot of attention to. So Jeff, speaking of labor movement, you're with the operating engineers. You guys are one of the unions that has relationships with the Republicans in some cases, support. How do we get more Republican support for high-speed rail in your judgment?
We are proud of our bipartisan credentials.
John?
Have a history of bipartisanship. We were pleased that a couple of our key allies in the Senate were leaders in the effort to pass the bipartisan infrastructure law. Folks like the Alaska delegation, Rob Portman from Ohio, Shelley Capito.
Why don't you turn the thing off? Let's pass the microphone around. How about that?
Yeah, Shelley Capito. The ranking member on the Environment and Public Works Committee with so much jurisdictional responsibility were really key movers in the Senate for that bipartisan infrastructure law. And we don't think it was a coincidence that all 13 House Republicans are folks with whom we've had a longstanding relationship. 13 House Republicans that supported the bipartisan infrastructure law. You saw a lot of those folks come from the Northeast. Brian Fitzpatrick from Bucks County has really been our most consistent supporter of high-speed rail in the Republican conference. We really are hoping to build on that a little bit. We know we have several new New York Republican members elected. We've got good relationships with them other than George Santos. And really plan to build on that a little bit. From the tip of Long Island, for example, Nick LaLota is family to the operating engineers. His brother is a senior official with one of our big New York local unions. Those are the kinds of relationships that we work to build, that we hope we can bring folks to the table with the North Atlantic proposal that was out there. You know, folks on Long Island in particular will have an interest in this, but really it's some of the public-private partnership work that's done too will really, I think, establish that interest for the business community as well. We've learned, I think, some policy lessons where we can have a dedicated right-of-way and not run into the property rights fights that have characterized some of these issues. I think where there are some other policy measures, local control, some of the other kind of traditional policy messages that are part of the Republican ideological kind of foundation. I think we still offer some support there as well. But your presentation about all those different factors that weigh in on a member's motivation, we do our best to appeal on a number of different factors there, whether it's support politically, whether it's being friends, having a familial relationship, as I mentioned, right? All those factors can come to play. And clearly we need more Republican support with the House Republican majority to really move the dial on high-speed rail here in this Congress.
Right. Well, and I should point out that the three of you guys, of course, are all the labor movement. And those of you in business, it's a very smart thing to have teamed up with a lot of these guys from the point of view of getting the broad support that we need to make all this stuff work. So this is all to the good. Keith, you are the owner of a transportation company in the Northwest and were instrumental really at getting Peter DeFazio in your neck of the woods to support the high-speed rail initiative when he was head of the transportation committee that did a lot of this work. You want to share some of your insights from that the work that you did to get him to do that?
For the media advocacy. So about 3 years ago, Andy and I were discussing his $1 trillion Rail Investment Act. And so we were, how do we get interest for that? And then Chairman DeFazio was moving his Moving America Forward Act. We knew we had to get in front of him as the person who was going to be driving the funding for our future. So Andy and I began, Ezra came on. We hired a media advocacy. I happen to live in Oregon, not his district, but certainly we have a lot of mutual friends. And then we put a media campaign around. We had an IP address essentially assigned around his house, his offices, and started targeting him, his friends, stakeholders. And then we befriended Brittany Quick Warner, who was the chamber president for the Eugene Chamber of Commerce. Bobby hit it on the head. It's what's the self-interest? It was his neighbor. She and I conspired at the direction of Andy and Ezra. We wrote an op-ed, placed it in the Oregonian, placed it in the Register Guard, which is his local newspaper. That was a Sunday. I got an email from him on that Monday, and he said, "Wait, let's talk." And then the next call was, "Okay, Ezra, we did this. Now what do we do?" So it was really granular, but it really started with getting the grassroots that were around him, his friends, his neighbors, his papers, and to really get him and the grass top to start talking to us. And today, he and I text and email, and he's become an advocate on a bill that we have in the Oregon legislature to fund our portion of high-speed rail.
All right. Well, in addition to traditional lobbying, guys, in terms of moving people, you guys want to say a word about some of the tactics that your organizations use to influence members of Congress, or the sort that you just described? I mean, Mike, you want to say a word from other railroads?
Yeah, we try to figure out where that congressman, senator, congresswoman is from. And we try to figure what would their interests be, where we can work with them for something, for them to work with us. And sometimes, just depending upon the member, sometimes it's an easy road, everybody's going down the yellow brick road, and sometimes it's not quite so easy. I have to say, I would be remiss. Andy and Ezra, you put on a fantastic conference. You've got some heavy hitters out here. So I wanted to say that before I left, and to everybody. As a union, we have had nobody as a stronger advocate for labor protections than Ezra Silk and Andy Koontz. So thank you for that.
All right. And that, what you just said goes to the importance of building a unified coalition like this one, to speak with one voice that everybody's agreed on, to exert the kind of joint power that we need to win these battles. And that's, I think it's just so exciting to see business community and labor and environmental groups and the whole crowd coming together. Dean, what kind of tactics do you guys use to influence members?
Oh, we've got a baseball bat.
Ah, nice. That, folks, whoever's listening, that was a joke.
No, but let's be honest, I never met a train that's a Republican and a Democrat. It's the most ridiculous thing that we have to worry about party lines when the United States needs transportation. There is no more room up in the air. There is no more room on the highways. There is no more room on the trains. And we have to worry about Democrat and Republicans? No, we don't. Because like I said, I never went on a train, a plane, or a car that was a Democrat or Republican. This is a national issue, and we all, as Americans, should step up and address it.
And having messengers like Dean here helps address those questions. Jeff, what about you? What you've said something about making friends and all those kind of things. Other comments on tactics that you think are appropriate?
Yeah, we try to design comprehensive campaigns and really appeal on whatever basis. Again, going back to your presentation, really try to ensure that we touch all the bases. Keith, I was intrigued by what you said about a digital campaign and the way you were fairly granular about this. We conducted a digital campaign and focused in the Senate to get the bipartisan infrastructure law to move, and targeted specific states. A number of those folks voted with us in the end. We had Republican senators in mind at that time, but we were able, with some of the modern digital communications these days, to really be able to drill down and match the voter file with those individuals we were targeted,
right,
with their senior staff. And we're following those folks, frankly, with a digital campaign. We have a list of 90,000 members on our e-activist list. We can tap into the AFL-CIO's list. That's 3.5 million members, if that's an effective strategy. And so, e-activism, getting an email isn't the same as, receiving a check, having to sit down with a trusted member of your community, but we try to touch all the bases. And I think that's what a good comprehensive campaign strategy really requires.
Absolutely. By the way, let me say a word about social media. And there are kind of two ways to use social media, both of which are complementary and important. This very surgical approach that Keith and Jeff have outlined, where you target specific people with ads or whatever on social media, which is huge today. And the other is is kind of massively moving organic social media through the internet. And we tried to assemble whole groups of social media influencers to act together to do that. And that's another major tactic that helps dominate the dialogue. Keith, you want to say anything more about tactics, brother?
Yeah, I'll say it's more knowing and understanding where the disparities are in our economy, because we have an uneven economic opportunity for some people, right? Rural community, there we go. Rural community versus urban community. We always talk about this divide, right? So how do we spread the wealth? And let me give you a story about Oregon. So Oak Ridge, Oregon, right outside of Eugene, Representative Fazio's area. They've lost 3 mills in 30 years. 2,000 souls are out of work, and 50% of that town lives below the poverty line. You go to Portland, Oregon, it's an economic urban center, but we all experienced 252% of delay now since 1993 in our lives, right? So everybody's moving to the economic core. When you look at what high-speed rail does, it's not about having people work in the economic core and then train to their house in the remote location. Reverse that. In that town of Oak Ridge, Three mills, think about all that brownfield. You need very little infrastructure. You don't need SDCs, you don't need road, and you have 4,000 souls ready to work, blue collar, green collar, whatever the case may be. And all you need is a few executives to take the train to the office as opposed to the other way around, because you can reach Oak Ridge now in high-speed rail, which is an hour and a half away. And you have all of that wonderful community, disinvested area craving to become part of the economic engine of the area. Because we can't grow our urban cores anymore. We can't keep gobbling up the greenfield when brownfield is readily available. We just have to spread out the economic opportunity, and we won't have a rural urban divide. We'll have a bipartisan approach, which is what Congressman Costa said last night. Let's make it bipartisan. And then it was followed up by Congressman Khanna saying, we need a manufacturing superpower. And it's right there at very low cost to build the infrastructure. So that's the message. And I tailor my message on who I'm talking to. If I'm in Portland, it's all about congestion, where it is terrible. If I'm in the rural communities, it's all about economic opportunity. So I would say, to your point on the slide, where's that self-interest? And if we make it work for the individual, we can get this passed in a bipartisan way.
So, but the notion of connection, fast connection, works both ways. For the people who want to go commute to Washington from West Virginia,
Exactly what Mike
and
was
for the
saying.
people
Exactly.
who integrating economically these areas that have been left behind economically with those who haven't to build new facilities in those areas.
May I just put an exclamation point on that? So Dr. Pearl was here, and looking at his data, when the Shanghai line opened up, the gross domestic product gain in Shanghai was right around 8%, massive, right? It was double in the rural economies that were hooked up with high-speed rail. Now that's just amazing when you think about, you now are supercharging our rural communities and improving the quality of life for all of those individuals across the state, not just on the line. So that's what we need to do, is we need to be better messengers about spreading the wealth throughout the entire jurisdiction, which could be a state, or in our case, the mega region.
And we got to remember, in politics, perception is reality.
Yes.
And so we've got to position these discussions so that they communicate the message you just laid out. So the kind of major tactics that we've heard here, that I think, and they're correct, calls to Congress really matter to members of Congress. Town halls, personal meetings, when you got their full attention, right there. Social media, talked about that. TV ads in their district. And of course, then there are the narrative setting kinds of activities that people can undertake nationally to set the parameters of the debate, whether it's polling, whether it's to say what the high political ground is. And members of Congress care about, in the poll, they don't care so much about is it popular or not, they care. If you voted for this, would you be more or less likely to vote for them? That's the key poll question. High political ground's a big deal, obviously, but so are these other factors as to who benefits. Okay, let me just respond to one question somebody asked me in the hall, because I think this is important. It is a little different than what we've talked about so far. The question was, in the context of the American political system, where parties change periodically, regularly, how do you get long haul stuff done? How do you plan for the long haul? The Chinese don't have such a problem, right? And the answer is, you've got to create things that are hard to undo. Which means getting things like we've been talking about, facts on the ground. We get a Brightline or a California rail system, nobody's going to take it away. And people are going to want it. When we passed Obamacare, it was pretty controversial, but trying to get rid of it, it's very hard to take things away from people. It's a lot easier to defend people who you're trying to, when you're trying to take something away from them than just trying something to get there inspired to. So we got to create facts. We got to create policies that are hard to take away. That's what allows them to stay around. Right, we have 2 minutes left for any other questions that you might have before we go to the next panel. Yes, sir.
One suggestion I found that talking about the level. Talk about stuff. They nod, they're polite, but they talked about sick people, railroad workers, and how our people didn't actually have sick. Right. And then we have to counter, sometimes talk in your own lingo, you know, we use acronyms that you're all familiar with, but you know, all of these concepts, but staff is, you know, maybe they'll read the briefing paper, maybe they wouldn't have that conversation before the meeting. So, kind of start with, like more of an overview.
Totally correct. And it goes the other way, by the way. Members of Congress and their staffs tend to start talking in acronyms and Hill talk, which is comprehensible to people in the Hill and not comprehensible to anyone else in the world. And so you got to translate that into normal person talk if we're going to win the PR battle. Yeah.
You know, the first thing that Ezra did when he joined US High Speed Rail is he put together a brown bag lunch for the congressperson's assistants, which I thought was great. Essentially, it was let's find out what level of knowledge they have, and then we'll start building from there. And I thought that was really brilliant.
Anybody else in the panel have one final comment before we go to the next one?
Okay, for anybody who thinks that high-speed rail is not for everybody, my daughter, I'm sure a lot of you here have sons, daughters, she had to go from DC with her boyfriend, to East Hampton up on Long Island. We threw her, she had never rode a train before in her life. We bought tickets, put them on the Acela, got them up there. We have very good friends and colleagues on the Long Island Railroad. They stayed to make sure nothing happened. If they got on the wrong train, they were gonna be there. They took that train. When they came back and we picked them up at Union Station, they were like, I don't even want a license. This is the only way to travel. How come there's not more of this? So that is huge.
I just have one comment. The last couple of years, we've tried to make some big strides on high-speed rail. We've had some progress. I'd say whenever there was some incredibly tricky political problem that I didn't know how to handle, this group right here is who I'd call up, plus Jeff Joins and Andy. You guys have just been incredible leaders on this issue. So I just want to thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ezra, for your great work.
As a labor organization, we're involved with a lot of coalitions. And the best decision we ever made was joining up with this group because of the leadership and all the work everybody does and the entire team. It's really, I'm really proud to be in this group. And I really believe at the end of the day, we're gonna get someplace together. And it's gonna be the best possible thing. My daughter's 18. We're doing this for our kids and our grandchildren because it has to be done. Thank you, everybody.
My last final shout out, hopefully. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky is introducing the REEF Act for rail labor. Rail labor is the last industry under sequestration, and we are finally going to get out of that with her efforts and the efforts of the Senate.
All right, good to hear that. I'll pass that along.
Please do. Thank you, everybody.
Anybody else have comments? Quickly? All right, then we move to the next round of